Hello and welcome to the No Balls Podcast. I'm your host, Patrick McDonald. With me, co-host Sheldon Kaufman. Today, New Orleans Pelicans episode. We're staying in the Northwest Division. Pelicans they had a pretty big offseason this offseason. A lot of change. How much of it's good change? Probably a good bit of it. And then some of it's some bad change. Anything on the Pelicans before we get started?
Um, nah. Let's just get into it.
Yeah, they got a ton of really fun players and a ton of maybe not so fun players. So we'll start here. 49-33, seventh in the Western Conference. They ended up being the 8th seed after the play-in tournament. First round playoff exit. They lost to OKC. This series itself happened without Zion. Brandon Ingram put up some stinkers in that series, but either way, that was the ultimate end of the team there. There was a lot of stuff talking about the Pelicans being the sleeper in the West. I didn't really see it. I always believed it to be Dallas. I wish I would have stamped that somewhere, but I didn't. Either way, this was probably a little bit better of a team than a 7th seed team. Expected record actually agrees with that. 52-33 wins, better than their normal record at home. Again, I think I brought it up briefly in the Pistons episode. They were shorted a home game, just like the Pistons were. It was something with the in-season tournament, shorting them a home game. Either way, 21-19 at home, so they actually weren't even that good at home. And then 28-14 on the road, so maybe they wanted that extra road game because they were significantly better on the road, which is completely different than normal. Either way, 33-22 pre-All-Star break, and then 16-11 post. So yeah, you can see they kind of slumped to end the season. Versus the Eastern Conference, 19-11 versus the West, 30-22, and clutch games, 14-15, and then in other games, 35-18. An interesting note I made on them, they had the least amount of clutch games in the league. They had like a 3-game lead in amount of clutch games that they had, and they were the worst. They had the least amount of them, and they were like a bottom 5 team overall in winning clutch games. So that's the win section on the Pelicans. Anything on that before we get into the stats around the 24 team?
Yeah, unfortunate that we didn't get to see Zion in the playoffs. I think a lot of people wanted to see that. I believe they lost. Did they lose to the Lakers in the first? Or they beat the Lakers in the play-in game?
They lost to the Lakers in the play-in game, and then they
Yeah,
lost to
yeah,
the
yeah.
Thunder.
Yeah, so yeah, but Zion, he performed well in that. Everyone was excited. It was unfortunate to see him get hurt. Um, like you said, I think CJ McCollum and Brandon Ingram kind of just did not show up in the playoffs when they needed to. It's unfortunate last year for them.
Yeah, and it was what was probably a career year for CJ McCollum. Weirdly enough, at 32 years old, probably is how old he is now, right?
Yeah,
Um, it
might have
was
turned his career.
yeah, really interesting player arc, I would say. I think Portland CJ and New Orleans CJ are pretty different players, weirdly enough. Either way, going into the stats from last season, plus 4.6 net rating, 6th in the NBA total. So they were actually, according to net rating, they were a top 7 team, well, top 6 team. So that aligns with the sleeper of the Western Conference propaganda that I was seeing all the time. We split into offense, defense, 11th and offensive rating at 116.5, defensive rating 111.9, which was 6th. So this is where you see that it is propaganda because they were not a top 10 team in both offense and defense. they were only 11th. Either way, as that's clearly a joke, they were a really solid offense and a top 6 defense in the league last year. So, we split it into their offense. 17th in transition offense. They were not great there. In the half court, they were pretty solid. 11th in pick and roll ball handler efficiency, only 23rd frequency, but the efficiency was really good, 66th percentile. In roll efficiency, 20th in roll efficiency, and then 29th frequency. They didn't run it a ton. You think about some of the bigs that they had. Jonas Valanciunas, we talked about him in the Wizards episode. He's not a good roll man. He's somehow a post-up player in 2024. Giannis, they like to use him. Oh, I said Zion because I was going to say they like to use Zion a lot similar to
To
how.
Giannis.
Yeah, they like to use Zion similar to how they use Giannis in Milwaukee, where Zion's kind of playing point guard, even though he's not their point guard. They'll give him a bunch of pick and roll ball handle reps, and some post ups, but not a lot of roll opportunities. So then a lot of the guys who were rolling, it's not their primary skill for them. And the guys who would set screens for Zion a lot of the time were often just kind of popping for 3 because it's JV popping out there because you want the paint open for Zion. Is the big thing. And then you'll see here with the post-up stuff, 11th in post-up efficiency, 7th in post-up frequency. This is, again, how they're using Zion. 66th percentile. And then in isolation, 7th in isolation efficiency and 7th in frequency, 79th percentile. 19th in offensive rebounding, 4th in three-point percentage, 24th in three-point attempts, so not a ton of shots, but they were making them. And then 1st in pull-up three-point percentage with 18th highest pull-up frequency from 3. So again, they're making their pull-up threes. They're not taking a ton of them, but they're making almost all of them, it felt like. Anything on their offense before we go forward into their defense?
Just on the 3-point stuff, I mean, just kind of look at the guys they have. Jose Alvarado, 37% last year. Herb Jones, the emergence of Herb Jones, shot 41% last year. Really good shooter. 3-point sniper, I like to say. Trey Murphy as well, who just had a career year, points per game wise. A lot of good stuff. Yeah.
A
Just
ton
wanted
of
to
good
highlight
shooters.
some of the 3-point shooters. Yeah, sorry.
Mm-hmm. And this team previously had the shot doctor and Fred Vincent. They no longer do. They do have a listed shooting coach, however, so not all NBA teams have a listed shooting coach, and it's interesting when teams do list their specific shooting coach. On the defensive side of the ball, I had told you pre-episode that they were strikingly kind of similar to Minnesota, just by looking at the numbers. 6th in, I didn't mention their transition. 9th in transition defense. Very good stuff. They're doing a lot of the things right on transition. 6th in pick and roll ball handler defense. 29th frequency. So teams are not running it against them a lot. But when they do, the Pelicans are stopping it a lot. 83rd percentile. 18th in roll man defense. 20th frequency. So not running it a ton, but they weren't running it very well against them. 41st percentile. 3rd in post-up defense. 23rd frequency. 93rd percentile. So a very good unit there, right? You're not going to want to post up Giannis and JV. They're a lot stronger than you, let me tell you. And then isolation defense, 3rd ranked, 18th frequency, 93rd percentile. And they're securing their rebounds, 8th in offensive rebounding. Or in defensive rebounding. Anything on their defense, it can start with scheme talk too, since we can go ahead and transition right to that.
Well, they had a guy that this is who I was thinking about, but anyways, they had a guy that made All NBA first team defensively, and Herb Jones. So I mean, they had guys obviously that were really good individual defenders. Like you said, no one's posting up Zion, no one's posting up Jonas. They have a lot of length. They have a lot of wings with good length. They have Jose Alvarado, who's known as one of the best or one of the most pesky on-ball defenders in the NBA. So just a lot of good stuff from them.
And a lot of their point Zion lineups is what a lot of people like to call it, where no CJ McCollum out there. They're running Dyson Daniels, Zion, Herb Jones, and Trey Murphy Jr. or Trey Murphy the second, I believe, is what he likes. Um, Either way, they like wings on here. They didn't have a ton of guards that played for them last year. Their backup point guard was Dyson Daniels. Again, he's 6'6". Uh, they had JV. They had Larry Nance Jr., who's kind of just an unskilled wing, or he's a 6'8" center, right? Like they're not running a ton of bigs. They're running a ton of wings out there. Is how they like to play. Additionally, Zion would always play the four. They didn't really like Zion at center, even if there were lineups where Zion was technically their point guard. On offense, positionally, he was their center. And they were never really two bigs. And then the two guard, like I said, is almost always a wing there in New Orleans. So, yeah, that is the brief summary of their lineup stuff. They didn't do a ton of super interesting stuff compared to what their lineups were, since they run a lot of wings. They do a lot of switching. Other than that, they play a lot of stuff pretty straight up. They have to run JV in a drop, so they did that. Other than that, they played it pretty straight up, and they did a really good job. 6th ranked defense last year. Anything else on their coaching and scheme?
Uh, you want me to talk about the offensive stuff
Oh
at
yeah,
all? Or,
yeah. Hit up
I
the
mean, you talked about it a little bit. A lot of it was screens to kind of get Zion to get missed. Like Zion sets a screen and then gets to switch, give the ball to Zion, um, let him work, whether that be posting up or just straight up driving. A lot of Zion posting up, a lot of Jonas Valanciunas posting up, kicking back out to CJ, or maybe trying to find Trey Murphy cutting or Herb Jones out there. And then at times they would go to a two-man game with Jonas and CJ, or Zion and CJ, or Ingram and CJ. Just kind of a lot of screens to get CJ or Brandon Ingram open in the mid-range so he can knock down what he's really good at in the mid-range shots.
Yeah, so their primary offensive strategy was using Giannis as kind of a running back, just saying, "Hey, we'll give you a lane,
Zion,
go
yeah.
run the lane." Did I say who did I say?
You've been saying Giannis. You
Well,
keep saying
because
Giannis.
they use them the same way. God dang it.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're giving Zion the ball and saying, "Hey, you're a running back. Go hit the hole and take on the safety at the rim." Whatever. Either way, that's generally how they like to set up their offense. Their changeup to that is Brandon Ingram and CJ McCollum creating out the pick and roll. Valanciunas is a good screen setter, right? He's maybe not so good getting to the rim and finishing because he misses a ton of bunnies, but either way, um, they want to give those guys space to create their shots. Um, those offensive styles conflict a little bit is the big thing that I like to point out with that. And we'll get into that later in the episode. But there's some bleeding of the two styles don't necessarily mesh together. Even though they developed an effective strategy with both Zion and with their other guys to create solid offensive possessions. And it's Willie Green is their head coach. He spent 4 or 5 seasons in Golden State during their run. clearly a guy who knows a good bit about offense. He's also a veteran NBA player. Really solid player. Do you have any other scheme stuff before we get into their offseason? All right.
Now let's get into the off season.
NBA draft, they had 21st overall pick. They selected your Baylor guy, Yves Messi. You said before that he's not really your guy. Talk about his game, and then maybe tell me why you're a little pessimistic on his game.
Well, yeah, I'll go ahead and give you the good stuff about Misi, and that he's a very athletic, lanky, or not lanky, but uh, lengthy guy. 6'10", about 230, with a 7'2" wingspan. He averaged 10 points per game last year, 5 rebounds, 1.5 blocks. Really good at rim running in transition. If you like posterized dunks, this was a fun guy to watch last year. Kind of like a high flyer. He was really good at in the pick and roll action, at finishing above the rim with lobs, or just getting the ball and going and dunking. Rim protecting wise, obviously he's good. I just told you his measurements, and he averaged 1.5 blocks last year. Uh, yeah. Oh, and he's super athletic, like I said. Why I'm not high on him? He was my least favorite player at Baylor last year by far. I just really didn't like him that much. His offensive game is very limited. He's kind of limited to the paint. If he's not scoring in the paint, it's not going to go in. He can't shoot. I don't even know if he attempted a 3-point last year. His free throw shooting is terrible. He can't finish on and one opportunities. Baylor lost the game to Houston last year because Misi got fouled, made a shot, missed the and one to put the game away. Houston made a three and went into overtime. Baylor ended up losing. Um, so yeah, they went and got a guy that is very offensively limited. He's really good defensive anchor. Uh, I'm not very high on Misi though. I think he really brings nothing to the table offensively. Because if he's not in the paint, he's not scoring.
It could have been first round picks. I had him last. That would have been behind Sar, Klingon, obviously, but also Khalil Ware, Tyler Smith, Kyle Filipowski. Um, I had him below all of those guys. He just seems a little too raw for me. His feel for the game is not super developed. I do think 21 was a little strong for him, and especially next to Zion, I think you really want the shooter out there. And he didn't really shoot in college at all, like you said.
He didn't have it like literally.
He just didn't. And I have a little bit of concerns about the rim protection stuff. You had mentioned 1.5 blocks a game, and that doesn't sound horrible, but he didn't. 1.5, if you want a good NBA rim protecting center, usually they average like 2.5, and you need a good rim protector next to Zion, because Zion doesn't give you much positional defense there. I just think it misses the mark a little bit with what they need on their team. Maybe not so much about the prospect. I'm sure if he went somewhere else, I would have liked him a little bit more. But he's a run, jump, and dunk big, right? It's Willie Cauley-Stein.
Pretty much. Yep.
Right. I did also see reports that he was up to around 240 pounds now versus being like 215 at Baylor. If that's true, then that's a positive sign. Maybe he can actually at least give them one-on-one defense in the paint. Maybe he's not a great help side defender yet because he wasn't really that in college. But I don't know. I think this is the most negatively we've talked about a first-round pick in this draft, and it wasn't a strong one. But I don't know. I'm not super high on the Missy pick either.
It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, there are other picks. Antonio Reeves. Did you get anything on Antonio Reeves?
Yeah. This guy's just a straight up shooter.
Yeah.
44% last year from the 3-point line. and it's not like he's a catch and shoot guy or he's a pull up guy or he's just a pick and pop guy. I mean, he can hit from anything you want. If you want to catch and shoot, if you want him moving, if you want him to shoot in transition, if you want him to do a spot up shot. I mean, he's just a straight up shooter. 44% last year. He's 6'4". Um, yeah, and he's really good off ball movement, and he's very active on defense, getting through screens, active hands, a lot to like on that side of the ball. Improving, he can't his ball handling a little bit. Finishing through contact and decision making can be issues at times, but I like this pick a lot more than I like the Messi pick for sure.
Yeah, for a second rounder, it wasn't ever going to be a perfect prospect. You get a guy that you know can shoot. He can probably fit into a lineup somewhere on this team right away. Um, he's 24 years old as well. Can probably jump right into some type of playing time if you need him to, right? And for them, they don't necessarily instantly need him to. They gave him 2 years guaranteed in the NBA with a third-year option. They clearly think there's a guy here. If I didn't actually get to evaluate him, I just reading draft profiles on him. If you think the defense is there, then this is a great second round pick, right? You get a 3-and-D guy in the second round, with NBA size too, is the big thing on him. I liked him. Solid pick for them. Other than that, if you are good, we can move forward to their off season.
Yeah, let's go.
All right. So they brought in Jamal Cain. So we should go ahead and hang up the Pelicans championship banner. Javonte Green, they signed to a veteran minimum contract. They claimed Trey Jameson from Memphis off of waivers. And then they signed Daniel Tice to an extension, or to a contract, veteran minimum. And then the big one, obviously, traded for DeJounte Murray. The package was Cody Zeller, Larry Nance Jr., Dyson Daniels, 2 first-round picks. We can talk about that trade a little bit more. One thing I do want to mention, they were at a point recently within the past 2 weeks where they were projected to pay the luxury tax. The Pelicans are a team that's never paid the luxury tax. What they did following that is they non-guaranteed Matt Ryan's contract, then paid him less money than his previous non-guarantee was to save some money, and now they're likely going to make a move at the deadline to get under the luxury tax. They did it last deadline. They traded Kira Lewis Jr. to Toronto to get under the luxury tax. They're probably going to do it. I think the thing out there was no team over the past 10 to 15 years has not paid the luxury tax and won the championship. A lot of that smoke screens, but just interesting stuff with them. Let's go ahead and get it out the way. Let's talk about DeJounte Murray here.
I mean,
I'll give you the floor. Yeah.
Huge, right? This was a huge deal. I think it elevates their offense a lot. I think they ran who did they run at point guard last year? Was it McCollum?
McCollum, yeah.
Yeah. So now you get DeJounte Murray, who is by far a way better playmaker than McCollum. 6.4 assists per game last year. This is a guy that's very quick, and he can still score from pretty much anywhere. His 3-point shooting is all right, but I mean he can score mid range. He can get to the basket. He can shoot. He's a really good defender. He gives you just lockdown abilities around the perimeter. 22 points per game. He's a good rebounder. As long as he can kind of chill out on the turnovers, I think this is a huge pickup for them, and maybe elevates them to more of a high end playing team, 7-6 seed. who knows? I like it though. I mean, they had to give up a lot though, but I mean, Dejounte Murray is a huge piece. But yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, I think it's really big.
yeah. So I want to give a little bit of pushback on the better passer stuff because I think they're very similar passers. CJ and DeJounte, that is. The big part with DeJounte is bringing him here does give them something different than Atlanta having DeJounte. Um, I think DeJounte will be more of a positive for them than he was for Atlanta, just because him and Trae Young kind of do the same thing. Um, I am trying to pull up DeJounte's mid-range percentage. It's been pretty solid. Even in San Antonio, it was pretty solid. Um, it'll be very similar to what they do with CJ and Brandon Ingram, where they're just trying to, if they really need a bucket, DeJounte Murray can go out there get him a bucket. I think what DeJounte Murray said in his press conference was he wants him and Herb Jones to both be on all defensive um, first team this season. And I think if you're getting that engaged version of DeJounte Murray, this is a slam dunk trade because you can play him with CJ, you can play him without CJ, you can play him next to anybody, right? He can play the one or the two if he's playing that good of defense. Yeah, he shot 41% from mid range this season. Really good, difficult shot maker. His 3-point percentage got a lot better in Atlanta this year. I had a little bit of pushback on that in the Atlanta episode, or it might have been in the trade deadline episode that I had some pushback on that. I'm willing to believe that he's still a solid 3-point shooter, and he can get his own shot. His playmaking's fine. Really solid trade. I like it for sure for New Orleans, even if I think he is maybe a tad bit overrated as a player. Unless he is actually as good as he wants to be on defense this year. But we'll see that. We'll see. Other than that, we can talk about their subtractions. Dyson Daniels for Atlanta, that's a big addition. For New Orleans, that's not as big of a subtraction because they have a ton of guys who kind of do that. Same thing as Dyson Daniels. So, not too much hurt there. EJ Liddell, he had been a two-way guy. Najee Marshall, this is like NBA Twitter's guy right now. Najee Marshall, I think he's a solid role player in the NBA for sure. I like Najee Marshall. It's a significant loss, but again, they still have Trey Murphy, Brandon Ingram, Herb Jones, Jordan Hawkins. Like they have a ton of these wing guys. Jose Alvarado. They have a ton of these guys who are going to play the wing spots and be a two-way shooter. They didn't need 7 of these guys. They need probably 3 or 4. The big ones for me, and I'm sure you had mentioned it before, Cody Zeller, Jonas Valanciunas, Larry Nance Jr. Yeah, that was it. Those 3 guys, all of them losing. Because we'll talk about it when we project their lineups, what their center depth looks like. Anything on those losses?
Yeah, well, I mean, you pretty much said what I was about to say, and that as big as the Dejounte Murray trade is, they kind of fucked up the whole center situation because right now you're looking at either Daniel Tice as your starting center or Misi, who we just talked about, is probably that you definitely do not want as a starter, maybe not even a backup. So I mean, that's why I'm kind of hesitant on this team a little bit. Is just because of that center position. I don't think you can be a kind of scary team or a competitive like championship playoff team with Daniel Tice as your starting center. Uh, maybe we'll see them make a trade during the deadline, but yeah, I think those are huge. I think they actually lost huge. They lost huge losses, and where I forgot where Larry Nance ended up, but when we talked about him we were saying that he will make an impact on his new team, and that he had an impact on the Pelicans last year, and it was these are pretty significant losses. So
Yeah, so Nance ended up on Atlanta. I
oh,
just thought
okay,
I
yeah,
forgot to mention Deron Holmes too in the centers. I had Deron Holmes above Misi. Um, there was a way to not give up all three, or they traded Zeller and uh, Larry Nance in the Murray trade. If they included Brandon Ingram, they didn't have to give up all of those guys because the salaries would have matched one for one, pretty much. Um, they chose not to do that. They chose to get all these centers. I mean, clearly they like these wing players. They have an obsession with them almost. Um, and the center position's really thin. We'll get into it in the lineup section for sure.
yeah.
So, other than those signings and trades that they made, they had one extension talk that they, you know, really made headlines. Going into the start of this show that we were starting, because we're starting it for the first time this season, there were two guys who were on the trade market that I was like, man, this could really F up a couple of episodes that we do if these guys get traded after we do them. Either way, the two guys were Brandon Ingram and Larry Markkinen. Brandon Ingram right now is on the last year of his extension. When it was signed, it was 25% of the cap. As of right now, he is due for the report that he wanted 45 to 50 million. I'm pulling up what he's eligible for. So yeah, so he's eligible for the same deal that Murray is eligible for. We talked about it last episode. Um, right now he could make 4 years 208, or if he waited next offseason, he could be 5 years 269. Either way, as of right now, his demands are basically that 5 year or 4 years 208. What do you think about this Ingram extension? If it were to happen, would you do it? I think other teams, the demand for Ingram was like not as bad as the Zach LaVine stuff, but it was pretty similar to the Zach LaVine, where it was like, man, we don't want to trade 3 first-round picks just to pay this guy. What do you feel about Ingram for that type of an extension?
I don't know. I mean, my eyes. I mean, I think Brandon Ingram might be worth the extension. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know who else is getting that kind of money. But I mean, Brandon Ingram, he's been the guy for a while now, and yes, Zion is looking really good now. We've seen him. I don't know. We haven't mentioned this yet, but he's looked slimmer, which is one of the big knocks on Zion. And I mean, as ridiculous as it is to say, I mean that he looks slimmer in pictures, but I mean that is a pretty big deal. Um, it could turn Zion into a different type of player for this team, but as of right now, I see it. I think you got to roll with Brandon Ingram and give him the extension. And if you're to trade anyone, I think you got to trade Zion. That might be crazy to
Mm-hmm.
think to say, but I mean, realistically,
I don't think
I
it
I think
is.
I think the Zion experiment should be over at this point. I mean, it's been too long. Now that might be now
Uh-huh.
Zion might go off and be crazy, but I mean I just think that's just my opinion. I think you keep Ingram and they get rid of Zion if you're going to get rid of anyone.
Mm-hmm. As of right now, as it stands, if they were to not sign Ingram, they would not have cap space anyway. I think the Pelicans are the only team that could justify giving Ingram this contract, and that's why I think the trade market for him is basically nothing. Right now, DeJounte Murray is getting, for the entirety of his contract, he is getting basically $30 million, which, if he's as good as they expect him to be, that's a steal. right? Basically, like 17% of the cap over the duration of that deal. That's kind of when you have those undervalued contracts is when you kind of have to overpay to extend guys. The Knicks did it recently. They now have the money since Brunson and Randall were underpaid. They had the money to overpay to extend OG Anunoby. Right now, I think the Pelicans are in that type of a situation where right now Zion's not getting any cheaper. Murray's not getting any cheaper. Herb Jones is making $12 million. Trey Murphy's extension eligible. He might already be Trey Murphy's already extension eligible. That extension's it's not going to be any cheaper than Ingram if you were to re-sign him now. I think you have to at least entertain extending Ingram, even if you don't like that money. Because if you sign him now, maybe it's 25% of the cap. Next season when the cap goes up, it'll be 23%. And if the TV deal is as big as people think it's going to be, it might actually be like 20%, right? This deal can only get more favorable. And if Ingram makes All-NBA this season, which probably doesn't happen, but if he does, then he's due for a much bigger payday. I think you kind of just have to do it. And you mentioned picking him or Zion. I think if you're ready, I'll get into some of these stuff because I think Ingram has gotten a lot of the blame for the shortcomings of this team because he struggled in the playoffs and also has his injury stuff, and he's not as theoretically unstoppable as a 260-pound guy who's really athletic, which is kind of weird because he plays stylistically similar to KD, and that's how everybody glazes KD. But either way, I think we got the wrong guy.
Thank you.
These are the guys, notable, all the players who played over 200 minutes for the Pelicans this season. I've got their net ratings with Zion and their net ratings without Zion. Brandon Ingram without Zion plus 6.9 net rating. With Zion plus 1.75. So like a 6-point swing. Or a 5-point swing. Jonas Valanciunas plus 5.1 without Zion. With Zion plus 4. So not as big. JV's not on the team anymore. So that's interesting.
Does it really matter?
Herb Jones without Zion plus 11.8. Herb Jones with Zion plus 2.1. So like a 9-point swing.
Damn.
There's no reason. Yeah, we'll get into the other names too. CJ McCollum without Zion plus 9.8. With Zion plus 0.7. A 9-point swing. Trey Murphy the second plus 12.4 without Zion. With Zion on the court plus 3.8. Najee Marshall not on the team anymore, obviously, but plus 7.7 without Zion. With Zion plus 8.9. So Zion actually was better with Najee Marshall. He's not on the team anymore though. So, oh no. Dyson Daniels without Zion plus 1.7. With Zion plus 5.5. So, again, and those were Daniels, Najee Marshall, and JV were the only guys who weren't significantly worse without Zion. There's 4 more names that I'm going to mention here. All 3 of those guys are off the team now. So the 2 players who got better with Zion out there are no longer on the team. It's going to be interesting. Jordan Hawkins without Zion plus 1.7. Without Zion minus 4.1. Larry Nance Jr. without Zion plus 8.9. Without Zion minus 1.5. Matt Ryan without Zion plus 3.3. With Zion minus 3.8. Cody Zeller without Zion plus 8.7. With with Zion on the court, minus 3.7. Basically, all of their players that they did retain were worse with Zion on the court than without Zion on the court. A lot of the players that they lost even had similar things, and all the players who got better with Zion, they lost. I'm not sure for this team at least, that Zion is better than Brandon Ingram. Additionally, one thing else to bring up, Herb Jones, plus 5.6 net rating. Zion was a plus 2.0. Herb Jones plus CJ was a plus 4.6. Zion plus CJ was a 0.7. Herb Jones plus Brandon Ingram, a plus 4.3. Zion and Ingram was a 1.7. Trey Murphy and Herb, 9.3. Trey Murphy and Zion, 3.8, right? Most of these lineups, Herb Jones was better than these guys individually. It's just, they're clearly missing the mark here on who's actually doing a lot of the positive stuff, because right now Zion seems like the fourth or fifth most impactful player on this team behind CJBI, Herb, and Trey Murphy. So, all this to say, maybe they should extend Brandon Ingram. Or they should switch up the roster to maybe fit Zion a little bit better. I'm not sure which one's better, but I know that these wings work well together. I'm not sure if it will next season because of all the horrible center play that they're going to have. Because, well, you think about the center play that they have to specify the type of center that they have to play next to Zion. A lot of the trade talks they had this year were about getting Brook Lopez, right? We'll get into lineups and predictions now.
That would be crazy.
Probably help them. Lineups
if they had Brook Lopez. Sorry, my fault. Go ahead.
You're good.
Yeah, let's get into the line. I got a little distracted there.
Starting lineup.
Yeah, I'm gonna go DeJounte Murray. I think they rock and I think they'll go CJ McCollum at the shooting guard. I know they're in love with the wings, but I mean CJ McCollum was out there, running the whole show last year. I don't see a scenario where you have him on the bench. I don't really think you can put DeJounte on the bench either, because you just gave up, a lot of your depth for him. Then Brandon Ingram, Zion, and Daniel Tice is the center, I guess. I don't think Misi is a starting caliber NBA center. If they put him there, they're going to get screwed. So I guess I'll go Daniel Tice. Not really much of an upgrade, I guess. I really like. I mean, yeah. I mean, Daniel Tice is. I don't know.
Yeah. So, ideally, you don't want to bench Herb Jones and Trey Murphy because they were two of your better players last year. Unfortunately, it kind of seems like they have to, or they're going to bench CJ or Brandon Ingram. What I think will happen, it'll be Murray, one of Herb and Murphy, Brandon Ingram, Zion, I guess Daniel Tice. Because ideally you would have wanted last year for it to be Giannis starting at center. So then you'd have Trey Murphy or Herb starting also out there. But Zion now has lost 30 pounds.
Yeah.
Additionally, there's this image going around of him standing next to Luka and Jason Tatum and one other guy. I don't remember who the other guy is, but Paolo. Yeah, Paolo. And Zion's by far the shortest. He looks like he's 6'5".
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't. The Zion at center stock has never been as low as it is right now.
Yeah.
And maybe the Pelicans just want him to be another wing.
Can you do that with Zion though?
I don't know.
Can he be just another wing? I mean, I don't know.
Because
I don't know.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what they do here because
I mean, Zion's been
I
a
don't know.
problem. Zion's been a problem for the Pelicans ever since they drafted him. Really, I mean, let's be honest. Ever
The
since,
injury
I mean, he's always
stuff.
been hurt. He's always been hurt, and then when he's came back, he's been way too damn big. Uh, they're kind of, and it's weird because when you look at this team, I mean, you have Herb Jones and Trey Murphy coming off the bench, possibly, or Trey Murphy and CJ McCollum, which is great, right? I mean, that's seven deep, and you have Jose Alvarado and Jordan Hawkins, who are both really good. I mean, that's a great depth. But then you look at the centers, and it's like these are third centers. Like, let's be realistic. Daniel Tice on any other team is a third center, and it kind of I think it's going to end up holding him back. I don't know
Yeah,
if you're on the same train as me, but like it's kind of a big deal that they don't really have a decent NBA center. I mean, I don't know,
yeah.
but
Tice
yeah,
Tice was the third center on the Clippers last year behind um, Zubac and Plumlee.
yeah,
Like I don't know. They really need Brook Lopez. It just doesn't make any sense. I it seems like we've completely neglected a position here, and that is exactly what they've done. And Trey Murphy and Herb Jones are like real NBA starters. Like
yeah,
you put those guys, the Bucks would give you first round picks to trade Brook Lopez for either of those guys.
100%.
I I'm so lost with their roster building right now, especially with the numbers I just read with Zion Williamson. It seems like the guys that played well with him, they got rid of all of them, and they kept all the guys who don't play well with Zion. But yet Brandon Ingram, who plays good with those guys, they just don't want to extend. And maybe I understand the second apron stuff, but I just looked the second apron. They are not going to be hitting the second apron. Right now, they're probably not going to pay the luxury tax. 25, 26, as far as first apron space, they have $61 million. That the Ingram with a Trey Murphy extension, finding a way to get off of some other money is not that hard. They can easily get there. They're going to be the best messily
Yeah,
ran team next season. I don't know. In a competitive Western Conference, I think this roster building weakness is a big deal. Overall, for the offseason, even though they brought in DeJounte Murray, I'm just going to have to say that they got worse.
yeah.
I know we're going
I'm
a
on the
little out of
yeah
order,
a
but
lot.
yeah.
Yeah, are you want to
Yeah,
give your
you got it. You
reasoning?
got it. I was gonna let you keep going.
Oh, okay. I mean, yeah, I'm on the same train as you, and I think we've kind of been talking about it a lot. They just got rid of guys or didn't re-sign guys they should have. I mean, Jonas Valanciunas is a was a guy they let walk. The Wizards signed him for I forgot what they gave him,
10 million
but
a year.
10 million a year. Like the Pelicans didn't have that kind of money. They couldn't re-sign Jonas again.
You could have signed Precious Achua for 6 million,
Like,
right?
yeah,
Like,
if you
I
got
mean, they
Precious
couldn't
Achua,
have,
I mean that would
but
like
let's.
some player like that, they could have gone out and got someone. I just don't understand why you do that. And when if you know you're gonna let Jonas walk, why do you go out and only get a guy that you signed for a vet minimum? You should at least be giving a guy what Jonas is getting paid. Because I mean, Jonas is I yeah, it's just I think they got worse. Yeah, Dejounte Murray was great for them, but I mean, what they lost was just too much. Especially, I mean, Larry Nance, like we said, was big for them last year. Um, so I mean, yeah, I don't. They got worse, in my opinion. I agree.
Mhm.
Yeah, they just
And
got
you
worse.
think about it this way: they could have signed another NBA caliber center, like another guy similar to Tice, right? For a league minimum. They didn't do that. Achua, I just mentioned, they couldn't have given him that full 6 million that he got in New York. But what they could have done is they could have given him a league minimum and said, "Hey, you're probably going to start for us. This is your opportunity to get paid.
Yeah.
At least come here for a year and be our starting center. They didn't do that. Maybe they had tried to, but it could have easily been out there for them to get something else. They just did nothing else besides Zeller, or besides Daniel Tice. I mean, it's basically the same guy. Either way. I mean, I don't understand what their plan is at the center position. Clearly, they think Misi's better than we think he is. But a lot of the people I've seen evaluate Misi as well didn't really have him as any better than we did. So that'll be offensive MVP, defensive MVP, X Factor.
All right. Offensive MVP. It's a toss up for me. I'm just gonna go Brandon Ingram. I think that he's gonna just he's heard the criticisms. He's gonna step into it. Like you said, I think DeJounte kind of comes in. I don't think he's gonna put up kind of the offensive numbers he put up in Atlanta, going like off of points per game basis. I think that Zion and Brandon Ingram are still going to be kind of the same players. But I think DeJounte is going to be great on the defensive side, and he would be my defensive player of the year if they didn't have Herb Jones. But I mean, we talked about Herb Jones. He made all NBA defensive first team last year. Lockdown defender, just really good. I don't see a scenario where he's not that guy defensively. And X Factor, we've talked about him a lot during this episode. And I mean, I guess I'm gonna go Zion. You can't go DeJounte Murray, but I like Zion just because I mean we've been talking about it. We've been harping on how just all of his issues and stuff. He's got to prove that he is a franchise player in the NBA. He's got to prove that he was a generational talent that got drafted number one overall. Right, number one overall
for a reason.
Yeah, like I mean, we haven't seen that. We just really haven't. I mean, that's why I'm going Zion, even though I don't like Zion. On the Pelicans, I mean, I think he is their X factor.
Yeah, so I'm going to hold off on offensive MVP for right now. Defensive MVP is Herb Jones. It's not really a competition for me. I think last episode I said McDaniel's the best non-big defender. Herb Jones is right up there with him. I honestly, either one of them. Herb Jones is that great defensively. X Factor for me is the big one. I don't know what to do on X Factor. You had mentioned Zion. I think I'm going to go DeJounte because I think his range of outcomes is the widest. If you get San Antonio DeJounte, as far as his intensity on defense, his general care about actually making the right play on offense, because a lot of the time in Atlanta it seemed like he was just getting into his isolation game a little bit too much when there were better plays out there to make, even though that was something I thought he really excelled at in San Antonio, was making the right play. If you get that version of DeJounte with the improved shooting ability that he showed in Atlanta, I think that might be the best player on this team. Maybe he only averages 18 and 7, but he plays great defense at point guard for them. I think that would be crazy for them if they could get that. And then additionally, I want to say like Trey Murphy, I think has a lot more to tap into. Like, I think he could be a 15 point per game scorer like last season. Like I thought he was that good last season as an offensive player. I guess offensive MVP for me is maybe it's still Zion because they're gonna do everything around him anyway. But I feel like there's a better option than doing everything around Zion. There's clearly a better option there. It's just, I think for what they're going to do, it's going to have to be Zion because they're just going to make everything around him when he maybe doesn't deserve that right away. So that's how I feel about the Pelicans. Any more comments before we wrap this one up?
Nope.
Yeah, so that'll do it for the Pelicans episode. Following this one, I believe is the Thunder, OKC, and then Portland. So yeah, next episode will be the OKC Thunder. We will see you then. Host Patrick McDonald signing off. Co-host Sheldon Kaufman. See you later.